Talk Shoes.
Recorded live.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Travis and Vic's Drunken Horror Adventures. Let's call it Travis and Blake's Drunken Horror Adventures right now, because Blake's actually here. And, you know, we had to have Blake. The first time we ever had him on the show was for the Wes Craven tribute, and here we are again with the Wes Craven movie. What's up, Blake?
How you folks doing tonight? Good to talk to you again.
Yep, absolutely. This is one that I've been looking forward to since the inception of this show, you know what I mean? And the more I watch Scream, the more I just get sad about, you know, the passing of Wes Craven a few years ago.
Absolutely.
Just, I don't know, man. It just makes me think of what could have been about a lot of things. And just, you know, it gets me to thinking about a lot of shit. But, you know, we're a couple weeks, you know, after the Romero tribute. So, I don't know. I guess I'm all in my feelings tonight. But we're going to be talking about a movie that is very important to horror. Like, I'll have some big things to say about it at the end of the show once we get through it all. But, Blake, this movie came out December 20th, 1996. So, like, as has been publicized, they decided to go the route that was not a popular route at the time and release a horror movie around Christmas, which was not the thing to do back then.
Very true. Very few horror films have ever come out around Christmas. I believe, you know, in all honesty, that Weinstein Brothers and Dimension Films really took a big chance on it, but it paid off for them in dividends. I think they knew they had something good, so they were willing to chance it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, and we'll get into it in the trivia later, but this movie was a long, hard road to get to, but this movie gets a 7.2 on IMDb. We'll get to whether we agree with that or disagree later. Pretty high for a slasher. I mean, if you look at most of the slashers, they're in the 5s and 6s, with the exception of like Halloween or the original Texas Chainsaw or Nightmare on Elm Street, but you know, this is up there with those heavy hitters and above a lot of them as well. So we're talking an ultra-popular movie, and, you know, it's, shit, Blake, it's hard to believe it's been 21 years since this movie came out, or almost 21 years. That's crazy.
I know. I don't even want to talk about it. It makes me feel ancient already. I mean, I'm sitting here today I watched some stuff with my kids, and yesterday, All Real Monsters. You know, and I was like, I told my oldest son, I was like, I was 10 years old when that came out, and I can't believe you're watching it here. 22 years later, you're watching it. That just, it's ridiculous.
There are some moments in the movie that make you realize that it's I can't believe 1996 I can even call an older movie, but to make you feel that it was a different generation than it is now, which we'll get to for sure. But first, let's throw out. It was directed by Wes Craven, as we talked about, written by Kevin Williamson.
Yep. And
it stars Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and of course a few others too. But everybody thought that it was going to star Drew Barrymore, and she just played a small part in it, but an important part. Let's not forget about that, which we'll get into in just here in a second. Budget of the movie was $14 million estimated, and its opening weekend it brought in $6.3 million, but then it held steady the next week, and then it went up, which is crazy for a movie because, you know, once you have that first, like, okay, let's give you an example. Friday the 13th remake, it had a huge opening weekend and then had a huge drop. That happens with almost every movie, maybe not as huge of a drop as Friday the 13th did, but to stay exactly the same and then go up, that never happens.
That's true. It never happens, but it's a testament to the power that was behind that movie, the driving force that was behind it. And, I mean, like I said, I think they knew they had a big hit with it, you know, and that's why they were willing to chance it. And believe it or not, I think the reason it held steady was because they released it on, you know, December 20th. And then after Christmas, you know, people had been seeing the trailers. I remember seeing the trailers for it on television right about Christmas time. And I was like, man, after the holidays, and I've got some money, I'm going to go see that. And I think that was the mindset of a lot of people. And I think that's why it continued to go up.
Yeah, and word of mouth was obviously big back then. You know what I mean? You didn't have the internet buzz yet
Right.
as much. It did play a big part in Scream, too, but we'll get to that next week. And Scream 3 next week. But Hey, Vic's on the line. Vic, this movie gets a 7.2 on IMDb. What do you think of that?
I think that's entirely too low.
Good man.
Well, there's
Good
that
man.
right off the bat. Like, as I said, this movie is up there with the heavy hitters of horror. I mean, especially slashers. But look at all these fucking sequels. They all get thumped. But, you know, the originals do pretty well. 7.2 is pretty high compared to others. But we'll get into my feelings on whether it's high or low after it's over. So let's jump into things right off the bat. All right, so this movie, it opens up. You've got Casey Becker, who's played by Drew Barrymore. And by the way, for anybody who hasn't seen the movie, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast because we're going to spoil the shit out of it bit by bit by bit. So I'm sure you've seen it if you're listening to a podcast about Scream. But if you're trying to make up your mind whether to watch Scream or not based on our podcast, I'm thinking maybe you should watch it and then come back and listen to the podcast. But
you
I'm
were at the wrong
also,
place.
who the hell has not seen Scream at this point? Really, I mean, like, I bet you more people have seen Scream in this generation than have seen Halloween.
Well, to be fair, I didn't see Pulp Fiction until I was like 23.
My wife's still never seen Pulp Fiction.
To be fair.
Which is sad.
So
What's wrong with you?
What'd you say, Vic?
What is wrong with you?
Not me. Not me. I've seen it.
Lord.
Not me. I've seen it. I love the movie. I saw it when I was younger.
Yeah.
So anyway, speaking of, by the way, I saw Scream when it came out on VHS, right after it came out on VHS. I don't know that I saw it on VHS, though. I think I saw it on, like, Stars or something, whatever the hell they had back then. So, or, like, Encore. So,
yeah,
I'm almost positive I saw it on TV. And I was in Texas at the time. I lived in Texas for a year. So I saw it when I was like 15. The movie came out when I was 14. That makes perfect sense.
I rented it from Hollywood Video. If that tells you how old, I am.
See, like I said, when you really get into this movie, it really is like you start to like a lot of it looks fresh and new, but then there's parts of it you're like, God, now I feel like that's a totally different world. But we'll get there in just a second because it's not going to take us long to even see the differences. Like, all right, so like I said, the movie opens up with Casey Becker, Drew Barrymore, who originally was supposed to play Sydney. We'll get there too. And she's getting phone calls from somebody. And, you know, the first thing they're like, you know, they're talking to her and they call back. It's the wrong number. They call back. And she's just kind of getting annoyed with the whole thing. It's pretty obvious, though, that he's fucking with her, you know. And he has an awesome voice, by the way. Right off the bat, Roger Jackson, he stands out in this movie. The guy who plays the Ghostface voice.
Yes, absolutely. He had a big career, still does, you know, ADR work and things. But I don't know, if you've got young kids, they probably listen to him because he was the voice of Mojo Jojo in the Powerpuff Girls animated series.
I've never even seen that.
Yeah, I'm old, show my age. I have a younger sister, and she loved the Powerpuff Girls. And Mojo Jojo was this little animated pissed off monkey with like his brain exposed in like a glass helmet, and it was.
Oh, okay, I know what that is.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I just didn't realize. Okay. Well, one of the things that actually tells us the age of this movie right off the bat while she's talking to him, she walks over to the TV. For one, it's not a flat screen TV. It's a tube TV from our childhood, you know, and she's got videotapes on top of it, VHS tapes. You ain't gonna see too many VHS tapes anymore except in flea markets, right?
And her phone, the phone she answers, my God.
Yes. Yes, this is not a cell phone. This is not an iPhone. This is a big-ass cordless phone that, you know, we were used to back then. And at the time, a big cordless phone was relatively, I wouldn't say new, but it was starting to become the thing that everybody had, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, look at the, you know, which we'll get there. Look at the house she lives in. Look at everything else. I mean, she's pretty affluent, and I think, you know, VHS players, when they first came out, they were $300 or $400. I mean, they rival the price of a new PlayStation system, you know, back in their heyday. So, I mean, there's a commentary on status symbols here, social status and class standing for sure.
Yeah, and it's really fucked up while she's talking to this guy, you know, who's basically asking her about herself and saying that he called the wrong number. And, you know, he's like, well, you know, what are you doing? It sounds like you're making popcorn. And she's like, yeah, Jiffy Pop. And he's like, I only make popcorn at the movies. And she says, I'm about to watch a movie. He's like, oh, and she's like, yeah, scary movie. And he's like, well, what's your favorite scary movie? Which is the line that obviously this movie is going to be associated with forever, you know, for good reason. And he throws that out, and they're kind of going back and forth. And he's like, what's the one with the guy with the knives for fingers? And she's like, Freddy, or she's like, Nightmare on Elm Street. He's like, yeah, I like that one. It was scary. And then, Blake, the part of the movie where you got upset, I'm sure.
No, I wasn't upset. I was actually kind of like, sort of. First I was shocked, and the second thing I did was I laughed because she says, yeah, the first one was, but the rest sucked. And
yeah, the first one was scary. The rest sucked.
Yeah,
which
Kevin Williamson wrote that
though?
line, So.
Even if you like the sequels, what she said is kind of true, though. Well, maybe not the part that they sucked, because there's a couple of good ones in there to me. But what she said, the first one was scary, but the rest, most of the others weren't scary. Part 2 and 3 kind of New Nightmare, but other than that, we always talked about this. Freddy became a comedian, and it became like a horror comedy. So, but this was not a Wes Craven knock. This came from Kevin Williamson. I listened to the commentary earlier today, and I had always heard that it was from Williamson. And Craven originally didn't want to have it in there. But
right.
Williamson convinced them to keep it in there because Craven actually directed New Nightmare, and so basically he's saying that his movie sucked too.
Oh, true. And, New Nightmare was the precursor to the format, which became more popularized between the postmodern deconstructed horror film with a satirical poke at society. That was sort of what New Nightmare was sort of like the precursor to that. So by doing that, I think Wes felt like that might have been sort of like a disrespectful nod towards him, but in the end, really, he kept it, and I think it was fine because there's a few other jokes, like insider jokes when you watch the movie that you have to be a fan of horror and of these films in general to get that. Otherwise, you're just like, what the hell,
Yeah. And while she's talking to the guy, and everything's casual, she's like, he says, what's your name? And she's like, why do you want to know my name? And he says, because I want to know who I'm looking at. And it's like, oh, fuck. And not only do you hear him say, I want to know who I'm looking at, you start to hear dogs bark. And that's when you know, oh, shit, this guy is nearby. You would assume it, but the fact that you hear these dogs bark, it just confirms the fact. So imagine being her, home alone. She's apparently out in the middle of nowhere because he even says the cops won't get here in time if you call the police, And basically, she's all by herself here, and you realize that he's around. This isn't a situation it's not like she's sitting there with a gun or something. This is probably California, so this movie's not going to end within the first 5 minutes with somebody getting shot. You know what I'm saying? Most people aren't owning guns in California unless they're in the ghetto, right, Vic?
Yes, sir.
But, yeah, it's just kind of interesting how it all escalates. It seems like everything's cool, but, it goes quickly to this guy's scary as shit. So, she's like, well, I'm going to call my boyfriend, and he's going to come over, and he's going to be here in any second, and he's big, and he plays football, and he'll kick the shit out of you. And he's like, I'm getting scared. He's just fucking with her. And the way he's doing this, like I said, it all goes back to Roger Jackson's voice and the script. He says, look outside, and she's like, what the fuck? So she looks out her back patio, and her boyfriend's all beat up and tied up back there. And this is where it begins, Blake. This is where it all starts, because to me, there's so many that took after this later on, this whole, I want to play a game, and that's what he tells her. And then I think of Saw now when I watch this, because Jigsaw wants to play a game. He stole it from Ghostface.
Right. And like you said, it goes back to Roger L. Jackson and just the simple lines that were so effective. When she says, "My boyfriend plays football and he'll kick the shit out of you," and then he says his name wouldn't happen to be Steve, would it? And the way he says it is like, oh shit, well, this has started out bad, and it's about to get infinitely fucking worse now for her. It's perfect.
Yeah,
Great setup.
And this is all fucking